Welcome to everyone joining on Zoom. Person, if you didn't get a lunch for the in-person people, there is lunch available in the collaboration space that you can feel free to grab. My name is Cecilia Pacheco. I work here with our the American Trip program. And also program. So pitching and pitch coaching was a huge initiative for us by a lot of our entrepreneurs. So we're very lucky to have Ingela Onstad here with us. She is a high performance pitch coach. And
thank you, Cecilia. Welcome everybody. How's everybody doing today? Good. Glad to see some folks here. And I know that we have some on Zoom as well. As Cecilia mentioned, my name is Ingela Onstad. I'm going to go into a little bit more about myself, but before we get started today, I'd be curious to hear from all of you what made you come today. Free lunch. What else? What are the situations in which you are looking to improve your ability to speak or pitch?
I'm a scientist and I'm used to pitching to government program managers, things like that. But this idea in the private domain, what they want in a pitch is so weird.
I could imagine. So you're looking for some ways to improve that for yourself.
And one of the things I found is that the audience is usually between 1 and 2. You don't do that. And in this kind of environment, everybody's in an audience. How do you pitch?
So all the different audiences. Okay, interesting. Thank you. Who else?
I've been dealing with the Mexico Angels. I'm doing a lot of their Zoom. I'm looking for funding. And I find that they're totally confused. They have no idea. They pick up, I'm a photographer, but they like backdrops. And then I have the photo farm studio, and they're like, you gotta make it more succinct to understand.
Okay.
You know, the feedback was so confusing.
Sure. Okay. So a little bit more, what I'm hearing you say is focusing on the content and keeping things succinct, like you said. Okay. You also had your hand up.
Oh, I'm a scientist in biotech industry, and so I'm here for a couple of reasons. One of them is I'm realizing that I'm in an industry where I need to kind of advocate for myself as I'm looking for new job positions or just climbing the ladder, but also because I'm in asset development and I want to be able to present the ideas I'm having so that executed. Wonderful.
Anybody else want to share? Yes.
She actually invited me to this. I'm also a research scientist. We have a conference coming up, so that's very timely. Just to be able to speak to a broad audience of people for that. And I'm also a mountain bike skills instructor. So I'm also customer facing in that respect, and just being able to talk to customers, with more confidence and be able to just really listen and get to the point.
Okay, great. Well, I like that you're bringing up that when we are looking to become more confident in public speaking and pitching and presenting, it can apply to many different aspects of our lives. My area of expertise is truly the way we present ourselves. In learning how to manage our anxiety is a big thing about it. Learning how to use our voices and our bodies adequately. You may have realized this already, but everything we are doing is a type of performance. And how many of you in here actually consider yourselves to be performers? Okay, a few of you, right? So there is a performative aspect of this. And I'm here today to really work on the performance skills surrounding this, so that when you are standing up in front of any given audience, you can feel like you are yourself version 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, so that you have a little bit of extra polish. You're feeling like, even though perhaps inside you're not always feeling 100% confident, that you can walk away saying, I think I comported myself well today. I think I spoke clearly. I spoke succinctly. My body did not give away my nervousness. My voice did not give away my nervousness. So a little bit about me. I have a lot of initials after my name. My first career was in professional opera singing. And I'm also a voice instructor. I don't do that much anymore. I still do the professional singing, quite frequently actually, but it's not my main gig anymore. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of New Mexico, AKA a psychotherapist. So I have a large background in working with folks who have anxiety in many areas. After that, I decided to become a coach so that I could work with people in all different areas, not have to build their insurance, work outside of state lines, and really specialize in things like performance anxiety, stage fright. I first started working with performers solely, and I still have a full group of professional performers that I work with. And then it kind of dawned on me, as well as receiving feedback from family and friends around me, raising their hands and saying, well, I'm an attorney and I'm applying to be a judge and I have to go through all these rounds of interviews. Could you help me? Yeah, of course, it's all the same skills. Oh, I'm a scientist who has to pitch a product that I'm working on. Can you help me? Of course, all the same skills. I call myself a high performance coach for professionals in the public eye, which is quite a mouthful. And I made that one up. Here's my pitch moment. If you have a better idea, let me know afterwards. And I really enjoy working with professionals who are striving for high levels of excellence in anything that they do. Why did I call my business Courageous Artistry? Well, originally because I was working with performing artists, but now I've kind of begun to think about it in the way that we all have artistry to what we do. And getting up and selling something, presenting something, speaking about something is always going to take a measure of courage. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to try my hardest to keep this presentation at about 45 minutes so that I leave time at the end for question and answers. Cecilia is also going to let me know if folks on Zoom have any questions, but I think we're a small enough group that hopefully we won't get too sidetracked if a lot of hands go up. If I start getting sidetracked, that's me having to manage my own performance and anxiety, right? I might say, okay, let's leave some of these until the end. What impedes our ability to pitch confidently? Well, many reasons. We might consider ourselves to be shy or introverted. Raise your hand here if that applies to you. All right, I figured most of the time when people come to presentations like this of mine, a large portion of folks say, oh, I'm here because I'm an introvert and this isn't my natural thing that I like to do. We may have a fixed mindset around our skills versus a growth mindset, according to the psychologist Carol Dweck, who wrote the seminal book on mindset called, incidentally, Mindset. She talks about how we suffer when we have a fixed mindset, when we believe I'm just not good at that. That's just not me. Guess what? We're unlikely to work on those skills and improve. We may have manifestations of anxiety in the body. We may feel things like our heart racing, our palms sweating, our voice shaking, our knees shaking. What else happens to us? What are some common manifestations of anxiety?
Mouth goes dry.
Mouth goes dry. We get digestive issues oftentimes. Can't read? Can breathe, yes, exactly. Our breath feels really short. This is all due to our nervous system, and I believe I have a slide in here that focuses on that a little bit later. But this is all natural things. These are all natural things that happen within our body when we are in a state of elevation, in fight, flight, or freeze. Our digestion shuts down. That decreases our saliva production. Our heart is beating faster, pumping more blood to our extremities to get us ready to fight or to flee. But in this moment, we're not fighting and we're not allowed to flee. We have to get up and be as calm as we possibly can be while a bunch of eyeballs are staring at us. If we're at a party and there's a dog at the party, if the owners of the house have a dog and we all turn around and stare at the dog at the same time, what's the dog going to do, right? The dog is also going to go into fight or flight. Likely their hackles are going to be raised or their tail will tuck between their legs. They'll yawn a lot, maybe they'll growl. This happens to us humans as well. Sometimes in our nervousness, we avoid preparation. Who is an avoider here? Raise your hand. I avoid sometimes too. Some of us are over preparers and we make ourselves more nervous by over preparing. We may feel like our voice is not working to the best of our abilities and we're doing a lot of ums and ahs, or maybe we've been told we're too soft, we're too quiet. Perhaps we've been told we speak too quickly. Rarely are we told we're not speaking quickly enough. We might be in our head and so focused on how we're being perceived that it's almost like we're having an out-of-body experience during this pitch or presentation, and we walk off that stage or out of that room and we go, whoa, what was I even present in that moment? We may worry about what folks are thinking about us. We may worry about our attire. We may often find that our mind goes blank or we lack focus. Who here struggles with that sometimes? Great, that's another aspect of being in fight or flight, that we go a little bit into the freeze state, and our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that's going to be responsible for helping us out in a situation like this, has lost blood flow because our limbic system, aka our lizard brain or brain stem, has gained blood flow because it thinks we're in danger. This is why we go blank sometimes. Or if it's really extreme, we have the freeze response, where we just feel completely frozen. Perhaps we're still able to perform, but we feel very frozen inside. We may have a lack of ability, and this is probably going to apply to some of you here in this room, to be in beginner's mind. You know your business so well. You know your product so well. You know your area of research so well that you are speaking over everybody's heads and they're not able to make sense of it. I hear a little bit of that in this room today. A hyper focus on content. Believe it or not, where I find most people are spending all their time is in the exact words that they're choosing to use to talk about their business or their venture. Sometimes when we are so hyper focused on content, we are overcomplicating it. We're forgetting how to be in beginner's mind for people who might have no awareness at all of what our product or business is. And then we're so worried about the words we're choosing, we're forgetting about all the other aspects of presentation. Anything else come to mind that I didn't mention on that list? No? Pretty thorough? Okay, great. I have a 6-step framework that I take my clients through, and we're going to focus on aspects of all of the framework today. Of course, I can't get into major details of all of it, but what I hope for today is that you can take away 1 or 2 areas where you say, I need to do more work there. And in that area, you can take away 1 or 2 ideas that I'll be sharing with you, and you can implement them later. So, preparation. In our preparation phase, I always like to have clients identify their core values. Now, this is not something that we're going to do here today, but what I will say is that very, very often, the types of clients that I work with have a core value of something like excellence. Resonate with anybody here in the room? Core value of being excellent at what I do. I'm guessing you would all agree with that. Or being seen as competent, right? So what happens? We get up and we don't feel like we're doing a good job, and that is in direct opposition to one of our core values, and it is very upsetting to us and to our identities. So sometimes exploring some of these core values can give us more information or insight into why we might really be emotionally struggling with some of this. We set goals. What is going to be my goal for this pitch, for this presentation? How do I wish to come across? Here we want to be specific. We don't want to set all the goals at once, so don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed by all the information I'm sharing today. Pick 1 or 2 things that you think you could focus on. I'll pick on you here, who you were talking about sharing your business in a way that is maybe not cohesive enough for the listeners to understand. So perhaps something you would want to focus on in future presentations or pitches is, how do I simplify the information? And you don't worry about anything else for that next pitch. And then you add on another level to that in your next pitch, add on another level. Address, as I mentioned before, the fixed versus the growth mindset. We'll get into that in a moment. And do a brief needs assessment. Where are my areas for growth? What have I been told by helpers, by mentors, by audience members? If I were to give a pitch for friends and family, or to my spouse, or to a business colleague, what type of feedback would they give me? Where are my areas of improvement? So back to Dr. Carol Dweck. She stated that a fixed mindset is when we believe that our abilities and attributes are fixed and unchangeable. If you take nothing else away from this presentation today, I want you to know that likely you have some fixed mindset around your abilities here. For example, I'm just not good at that. That's just not my strength. A growth mindset is when we believe that our abilities can be developed. And I'm here to tell you that everything I am presenting today, you can grow this, you can develop this, even if you are the shyest shy person that ever shied in the shy universe. So an example of that is to say to oneself, although that skill, insert word here that you're working on, is more difficult for me, or doesn't come quite as naturally to me as I would like, if I devote time and energy to this, I can improve. All right, in the skills phase, this is where I spend a lot of time with clients, and I focus on lots of different areas. I'm going to touch on a couple here, but really where I start with all of my clients, whether they want it or not, whether they identify as being anxious about this or not, is in anxiety management. Because the moment we step into a room and are in front of a bunch of eyeballs, as I am right now with you, I'm sure if you put a heart rate monitor on me, I would have an elevated heart rate. Although performance is something that I do often, I teach this, I help people with it all the time. When a bunch of eyeballs are on us in a room and we care about what we do and we want to do a good job, we are going to be in a state of nervous system elevation. You may not feel that. You may be a person who says, no, not me, not me. But I'd be willing to bet you a significant amount of money that if we hooked you up to the right kinds of monitors, we would see that your heart rate is elevated, your respiration is elevated, your stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol are elevated. And I explain this because I want to just let people know there's nothing wrong with that. You are a normal human. This happens all over the animal kingdom. This is just a part of being human. And if we learn some skills, we don't have to allow it to get in our way as much. So I address anxiety management. We're going to get into a piece of that in just a moment. I address, if the client so desires, how are you using your voice? If you feel like your voice is one of your struggles, then how are you using your voice? And we work on specific exercises to build more volume, to think about the rate at which we are speaking, to use inflection to our benefit, to take pauses if we need to for emphasis. We also look at body language. I'm fine if you pace around the room. I'm fine if you're a person who talks with your hands, but let's figure out if we can help you feel calmer in your body and maybe be a little bit more intentional with what is happening with your body. And this goes, of course, for facial expression as well, because when we are speaking to an audience, when we are giving a performance, if our faces cannot be somewhat animated, our audience loses interest. I don't care how interesting your product or business is. If you are reading like a deer in the headlights, we are going to lose people. And then content, which is not my area of expertise, but where I do spend time with clients in content, is saying too much, less, 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 as well as don't be so hyper-focused on it. Okay, as I mentioned, our fight, flight, or freeze response is what's responsible for a lot of these issues. Because we may be able to talk in a super animated, exciting, convincing fashion when we're talking to our best friend about what we do, or when we're talking to one of our trusted colleagues. Raise your hand if you find that's true. You can sell it well to your friend or to your colleague, but maybe not to a room full of people. Okay. Our brains are constantly, even when we're asleep, scanning our environments for threats. This is just to keep us safe and alive. Social interactions, what I am doing here today with all of you is a type of social interaction. I'm also doing a presentation and or a type of pitch right now, is another type of threat. Why would that be? I have a lot of science people in the room. Why would social interactions be a type of threat? Yes.
You really mess it up, then the group will think that you are not a competent or a valuable.
Exactly. And if we think back into our evolution, it would have been even more important for us to stay in the good graces and esteem and respect of the group or tribe that we were running with, so that we weren't left out on our own to die in the cold tundra or wherever it is that our ancestors came from. So no matter how much we like to think that we've evolved past that, and in many ways we have, we don't live, here, us in this room, we don't live in those types of societies anymore. At the same time, we have very ancient wiring in here that tells us that if I get rejected by you, I might die. So no wonder we get a little bit scared. The symptoms of fight, flight, or freeze that we experience are the rise in cortisol, adrenaline, amongst other hormones, we feel muscle tension. Like I said, we have digestive issues oftentimes because at that moment in time, when we're fleeing from the lion or going to fight the lion, it's actually not imperative that we digest our lunch. We lose blood flow, as I mentioned, to the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain we need most desperately to be working and firing well in these nerve-wracking situations. We feel sweaty, we feel shaky, our hearts race, etc. Once again, all of this, just to let you know, completely normal, happens to all of us, nothing wrong with this. So one exercise I like to take my clients through, and this could be part of building some type of pre-pitch routine, or what I call a pre-performance routine, is to notice when you are feeling anxious, and then to engage in some type of focused breathing activity. You could do this, I mean, literally, I could have been doing this as you all were walking in the room and you wouldn't have noticed. Perhaps I was, you don't know. But the hissing breath is what we call just a long exhale breath. I call it the hissing breath because the first step I like to have you hiss out like a snake. So humor me, and we're all gonna do this together. We're gonna take a really easy inhale. I prefer through your nose, but do it through your mouth, but that's fine. None of this. That's not easy, okay? Don't tank up. Easiest inhale you can imagine, and then you're gonna hiss it out like a snake. So keep doing this as I talk to you. When you get to the end of that breath cycle, take in another easy inhale through your nose and hiss it out like a snake. Come on, keep going, folks. There we go. I wanna hear the hissing in the room. Now, we can also do this like we're blowing through a straw. What we're doing here is we're closing down the aperture through which the exhale escapes. Why would we be doing that? In order to lengthen the time in which we are exhaling. Why would we be doing that? Well, it's just kind of a cool thing about our bodies that when we have an exhale that is at least twice as long as our inhale, it stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is responsible for engaging the parasympathetic nervous response, which keeps us calm. Do I have this here now? So we want that. We want more of the brakes in our system than the gas pedal. And when we're in fight or flight, we're in the sympathetic response. So we want to get into the parasympathetic, and we can do that by just doing this easy, long exhale breath. Now, I've literally sat on a concert stage before. I'm in my fancy gown, sitting in front of a symphony orchestra. I might not be singing for 20 minutes and the orchestra's playing and the other soloists are singing. And I might feel fine when I first walk out there and I'm sitting down. And then when I know I have to get up and sing in a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, what happens? I start to feel my heart race. I feel sweaty. I feel twitchy. I feel nervous. So I will sit there and I will do this on stage. Nobody notices anything, right? But I am closing down that aperture. I'm letting the smallest stream of exhale escape. You want to do this about 5 to 10 times in a row. If you're feeling really rattled before your presentation, go somewhere quiet where you can do this. If you can't find somewhere quiet, do it the way I just taught you to do it in front of a room full of people. Nobody will ever be the wiser. All right, I'm actually going to go back to the skills part, and I want to focus on a couple more things. All right. There are a couple things I want to touch on today in the voice area and in the body language area. So in the voice area, if I were going to give you 2 quick tips for how to use your voice better in some type of pitch or presentation, it's going to be 2 really, really simple things to remember. Number 1, you want to try to speak more slowly than you're going to want to. Because when we get nervous, we speed up, we feel like we don't have enough time, we just keep babbling. Blah, 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 blah. Also, when we are content experts, we tend to have a lot of words in our head about what it is we do and all of our expertise. And we want to rattle off all those words so that our audience knows how smart we are, right? I mean, come on, we all do, right? We want to get up and just prove how smart we are. So we're going to fit in all those words, and we're nervous, and it's going to go way too fast, and nobody's brain is going to be able to take in all the information we're giving because that's not how our brains are built. So when you are getting up to do this, make sure to slow down your speech a bit. You want to practice this. You might want to do an exercise I call turtle talk, where you practice your pitch going extra, extra slow, just to get a feeling of what that is like. Of course, you're not going to be doing this in front of the audience, but forcing yourself to slow down your speech can be really helpful and create more mindfulness when you do get up to speak. The other quick, easy tip that I would give you is This is going to apply to most of you, not all of you, but most of you. And you'll know if it doesn't apply to you. You need to be speaking more loudly. You need to up your volume a bit. Even if you have a microphone. Come on, you were just talking about going to a conference, right? How many people get up and talk about a paper at a conference and they've got a mic right in front of them and you're still like, I'm not getting anything, right? Either they're speaking too quickly or they're too far from the mic or they don't know how to use a microphone. Exactly. So if we can aim to speak a little bit more loudly, we're already going to be more convincing in our performance or presentation. This is not my normal volume. I have a pretty present speaking voice from years of training as a singer, but I'm amping it up right now. If I normally think of my volume as like a level 5, for me right now, I might be at a level 7. This might feel strange to you at first, but just a quick reminder that when we do new things, we're always going to feel a little awkward doing them because it's new. And our brain gives us the message, I don't know about that. That's new stuff. I don't know if I like new stuff. Brain does like novelty, but it also likes lots of routine and comfort, right? So focusing, if you are practicing your pitch with someone, making sure that you're pretending that you're in a large room. Perhaps sometimes you're in a small room. I would still say if I was the person giving the pitch and this front table had 4 people at it, I would still be using likely around the same volume level as I am using right now. If you do have a microphone that you have to use, you might want to do some research on microphone techniques. Because all too often, people start speaking like this, away from the microphone. And you know, as audience members, when that happens, you're lost. You can no longer really pay attention to what they're saying because you're missing valuable pieces. You're distracted by the fact that you can't hear everything. You're getting annoyed by it. I mean, I know I am. Okay, with our bodies, when you're practicing your pitch, pay attention to whether you are having what I would call a more internal view, where you're thinking so hard that your eyes go kind of blank because you're so focused on getting all the words right. Or if you can make your eyeballs more alive and actually speak to your audience. Now, I'm comfortable enough to make eye contact with folks in my audience, whether I'm speaking or singing, but I've been doing this for years. It doesn't bother me. In fact, I enjoy the personal contact in the room because it helps me know that people are engaged and that they're enjoying it, right? But you don't have to make eye contact if that worries you. We can look just over the tops of folks' heads. So right now, I'm looking at all of you in the room, but I'm just looking right over the tops of your heads. And probably to you, it might look like I'm still making some eye contact, but I'm not, right? So we can trick things a little bit. We want to look in folks' directions, but we don't have to stare into people's eyeballs. What also can be helpful in these moments, and this now of course depends on the size of the crowd that we're talking to. If we're just talking to 3 people, this might not work as well, but it could. Identify the friendly faces in the room. Identify the faces that seem more engaged, that are smiling, that look more open. And also keep in mind that if some faces look unfriendly, they might just have resting you-know-what face, right? They might have a stomach ache. Maybe their cat is sick. Who knows? It's not always personal. So beware that when we are talking to a crowd of people, we oftentimes hone in on the people who look distracted or who don't look friendly, and we get all in our heads about what they must be thinking about us. Yes?
Should you focus on the people in the audience that would say be the most important, like the judges or the venture funders or the...
That's an interesting question. I'd say it's something that you could experiment with. And I would guess a lot of it depends on context. So if there are a lot of people in the room, and this is just my opinion, I would guess that the most convincing performance you can give would be to try to be inclusive in that performance. My fear would be if you were overly focused on the judges or the most important people in the room, that might make you more nervous. Oh, what are they thinking about this thing I just said? Oh, how did that comment come across? And you might get hyper-focused on their reactions to what you're doing. Whereas if you can find some friendly faces in the room and speak to the whole room, I believe that speaks a lot to your confidence as an individual. It speaks a lot to the confidence that you have in your product or your project. And overall, somebody could come in. I'm sure some of you have watched some of these audition TV shows like America's Got Talent or American Idol or these types of shows. Sometimes the performances we like the best or the things that move us the most maybe weren't the actual objective best there that day. But something about it spoke to us. Something about that person spoke to us. So while I would never advise that you should, not have the best product out there, I do think that there's something about including the whole room. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. As a follow-up, would you be responsive to a reaction of one of the people that you're actually talking to?
So your question was if we would be reactive to the response of one of the judges or important people? Like, let's say, I'm guessing you're thinking they make a face or they sort of give a quizzical look.
Yeah.
Would you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
I would say no.
Not directly, per se,
Yeah.
but to adjust the presentation.
Sure, well, that's a slippery slope. Because they might have just thought, did I let the dog out this morning? Shoot. Did I leave the stove on? They could be thinking a million different things. So whether I'm working with coaching clients or back before when I was a therapist working with therapy clients on their anxiety, one of the things that we talk about with anxiety management is don't be a mind reader. You're not one. So the minute I start trying to get in your head and figure out what you're thinking about me, I've lost. So even though a judge may give a look or a stern look or something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And if it does, I suppose we just have to have the trust that if they have a question or concern, they will come up to us afterwards. So I think while I understand the sensitivity that we want to have to people's reactions, I think that that could very quickly get us off track because we'll start getting in other people's heads and assuming that we know what they're thinking. So thank you, that's a great question. Okay, like I said before, with content, all I'm going to say to all of you today is you are likely overcomplicating things. On the wild and woolly world of Reddit, if anybody is a Redditor, it's a toxic place to be, but it has a lot of information. They have a great concept that they say ELI5. Explain it like I'm 5 years old. So I like to use this with my clients when I feel like they're overcomplicating their information. Now, of course, some of you have products that you wouldn't ever be able to explain necessarily to a 5-year-old. But think, how would I explain this to a 15-year-old perhaps? What is the clearest language I can use? And of course, know your audience. If you are a scientist speaking to other scientists, you can speak in a different way. However, a lot of these other tips I think I've given you today might be helpful. If you are a scientist speaking to lay people, which is perhaps what you were getting at, sir, or people who have less experience with what it is you're talking about, I hate to use the words dumb it down, but in a way we need to be as clear as possible so that your average person is going to understand it because they don't care about our jargon. And if we start using too much of our own technical professional jargon, we do lose people. And this is especially going to be important in the realm of venture capital, where you're talking to people who hold the purse strings, but they may have very little experience in your area of expertise. All right, a pre-pitch routine. I like to advise that my clients really plan backwards in their day. On the big day, you have a big thing to do. Think about the lead up to that big event. Don't cram your day full of so many stressful things and then you're driving over to the venue in a rush. I like to have people work backwards. How much time do you want to leave just in case there's traffic? How much time do you need to drive there? Check with your GPS. Pick out your clothing the night before. Leave nothing to chance the day of. Make sure that all of your day is well set up and your time is well managed so that you are not already arriving in more of a nervous excitement than you already will be. Now, some people say, Ingela, doing all that would just make me more nervous. That's fine too. But I would advise you try it out. If you've never planned backwards from an event before, really think about it and think about, and I'm sorry if in this room with this blue script is not as visible, but an example routine that I have here would be on the morning of the pitch, I will get 20 minutes of light exercise to work out some of my nervous energy. I will spend 10 minutes reviewing my notes or practicing my pitch. I will do a few minutes of warming up my voice and body. Maybe I practice giving my pitch in the room. Maybe I sing along with the radio on my favorite album on the way to the event so that I've gotten my voice working. Maybe I do some stretching. Perhaps I spend a few minutes sitting quietly and visualizing myself giving a successful presentation or performance. Visualization, highly underrated. It's used in sports psychology all of the time. All the world's best athletes and performers are using visualization to help aid them in their performance. And we can use it in the business world as well. Do some calming breath exercises as I drive to the event. I can do my hissing breath while I'm at my steering wheel. And then, perhaps we do a brief guided meditation, or we find a quiet place in the venue for a moment and we do some breathing and some more visualization. Be very intentional about it. Treat it as if it were literally a performance, and be mindful of keeping your nervous system in as much check as you possibly can, versus allowing yourself to get stuck in your head and of all the fancy words that you're going to string together and impress people with. I'm guilty of it too. All right, now for practicing. I really advise that if you are giving a pitch that is important to you, that you practice this in front of people. You're not going to want to, I know it. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. You're not going to want to say, hey, honey, can you sit down and listen to me do this for a few minutes? You're going to, I don't need to do that. You're not going to want to ask your friends or business colleagues, hey, can I practice this for you? It feels vulnerable. I get that. Yet at the same time, you will have the experience of your nervous system going into a higher state of agitation that you will then have to learn how to manage, right? Even if I'm doing something in front of my husband is also a professional singer. If I'm practicing some music while he's in the house, part of me and my head is busy thinking about what he's thinking about it, right? And this is my most trusted and beloved person. So we can't help but want to impress people, even if it is people we trust greatly. So this is a great way for you to go give this a whirl, not only to practice the words that you're going to use, but to get the feedback from them. Hey, what could I work on? Did I speak slowly enough? Did I speak loudly enough for a big room? If you're doing this at home or in an office space that accommodates it, I would suggest that you build a bit of a simulated space where maybe you're standing further back from the person if you think that's how it's going to be in real life. Or if you think you're going to be walking into a tiny space and both of the VC people are going to be sitting right here looking up your nose, practice that as well, because that's a whole other energy when somebody's sitting right in front of you. Practice it in front of a mirror. You're going to see a lot about how your facial reactions are happening if you are doing this in front of a mirror. I used the example before of using turtle talk, making sure you're practicing and slowing down your presentation. Practice using pauses. Pauses are a very, very, very convincing way to convey what is important. And when somebody is doing it in conversation naturally or naturally in presenting, you don't notice. But you could plan some of these pauses in. You could even write a little, use a highlighter and pick some spaces after important ideas or sentences where you want to take a little bit of a break. This also gives you a moment to resettle in your body, to take a breath. And we're going to need to do that, as you pointed out. Our breathing is impacted when we're nervous. So nothing worse than going to a presentation and somebody's just kind of gasping like this because you can tell they're really nervous, and then everybody in the room gets nervous, right? We have these amazing things called mirror neurons in our brains. We mirror one another's nervous system states. If you are in the room with someone who is incredibly nervous and twitchy, you start feeling nervous and twitchy as well. So our job as we get up here to present is to be the calmest self we can possibly be. Easier said than done, I know. Be aware of your breath, your body, and your voice. All right, on the day of the pitch, think about everything you practiced and then pick one or two goals. Don't try to do it all. I'm sure all of you in this room are major overachievers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here at noon on a Monday listening to a presentation about pitching, right? You're looking to be the best people you can be, the best professionals you can be. I know you're all straight A students, etc. So don't do that. On the day of the pitch, just pick one or two things to work on. Hopefully in your lives, in your professional careers, you're going to have multiple opportunities to do these types of things. So you can build upon your skills. But if you try to do everything that I talked about thus far today, you will likely feel quite overwhelmed. And you'll walk out of there going, I don't know if I was able to do any of that. Set some intentions. Today, I intend to speak slowly and with good volume. Speaking more slowly is one I have to work on because, of course, this is my area of expertise. So I tend to want to rattle off a ton of facts and just throw all this information at you. And I have to be mindful that your brains can't process all of that information. And you are going to get more juice out of my presentation if I take my time. Today, I intend to keep my chest open and have a smile when I walk into the room. A lot of us, most of us, almost all of us, when we're feeling nervous, what do? Our body curls in on itself. Why is that? What are we protecting here from predators? Our internal organs, right? This is why animals collapse in the wild. This is why we collapse as humans. It's an instinctive way of protecting our internal organs. When I keep my chest and my sternum open, I'm telling you, as my predators, I'm not afraid of you. You can't get these internal organs. I'm not scared, right? And we can come across more confidently. All right, a post-pitch routine. As I said, I wanted to leave some time at the end for questions, but I think that this is an undervalued and perhaps underutilized part of what we can do to improve. Number one, this may surprise you, celebrate. If you've done this, and even if you don't think you did the best job ever, before going to do this important thing that you're nervous about, pick something you're going to do afterwards to celebrate yourself. You've done something challenging. When people in the United States list their top fears, guess what is highest on that list most often? Public speaking, right? This is not a big deal. This is something that most of us are not naturally built for, that we don't like to do, that is some of our worst fears, especially those of us who consider ourselves to be introverts. So pick something to do to celebrate. Buy yourself a fancy coffee, take yourself out for dinner, take a walk around a park. I don't know. Do something to show yourself, hey, that was hard and I worked on it. I did the best I could. Is there room for growth? Of course, always. But hey, atta girl. Then take some time to write down your victories. Likely there was something that you did just a little bit better than last time. And I say write this down because it forces us to get really granular. If I sit there with my paper and pen and say, okay, Ingela, what did you do better today than you did last time? I really have to think about it. So be intentional about that step. Then, and only then, after taking some time, celebrating, writing down our victories and our progress, take some time and then think about what you want to do better. And why do I say take some time? In the moment, after we've done the thing, oh yes, you had an answer.
Some other ideas might have popped up that you didn't have right away.
Okay, yeah, sure. You'll have more ideas that could pop up with a little bit of time and distance. When you walk off that stage, even if you feel like you knocked it out of the park, your adrenaline and cortisol are pretty high, right? You're still in fight or flight. You are not going to be thinking about it very clearly. And oftentimes the moment we walk off the stage or out of the room, that is when we are at our most vulnerable and at our most tender and most self-critical. So I know when I walk off the stage in a performance, I'm automatically going, what could I have done better? I missed that. I would have done that better. And I'm going down the laundry list. I'll get to you in a minute, Cecilia. And so if we take some time to digest, things oftentimes feel a lot better in a day or two. And that's when we can think more clearly about our progress. Yes, Cecilia.
So someone in the chat is wondering if you have any fast pointers about memorize and the not freezing while delivering.
So the not freezing part is what I'm speaking to when I'm talking about anxiety management. When we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to memorize something and memorize it just so, we are inevitably increasing our fight or flight. We're making ourselves more nervous by doing that. when I am talking with clients about memorizing, I think what can be very helpful is to first write out everything that you might want to say, right? Just do a brain dump. Here's all the stuff that's in my brain about my product, about my business, blah, everything on paper. Then go through and circle or bullet point the most important things in there. If I had 2 minutes, 1 minute to explain my business, what is the most important thing that people need to know about what I am doing here today, what I am presenting to you? And then to memorize around the bullet points. So it's like in our head, we will memorize the bullet points. Maybe the bullet point would look, I worked with a software salesperson recently, and he had a big conference he was presenting at, and they had 60 seconds each to get up and talk about their company's product. So we boiled it down to he needed to introduce himself and his company very clearly, right? That's very important. And oftentimes we kind of skip over that part. He needed to talk about what his product is, how it serves people, how it makes their lives easier, how it can increase the bottom line. And then he needed to have something to sign off with. So, you know, depending on who you are talking to and what you are presenting, you can look up online, what's a basic elevator pitch, right? And then you build off of that. So in memorization, I would never, unless you're an expert memorizer, suggest that you aim for word by word memorization, but rather you are memorizing bullet points and bullet points only. Because if you're memorizing a whole entire thing, likely you're gonna be doing one of these. Oh gosh, now I have to say this word and then this part comes. And you are going to go completely blank because you will be so internally focused on your script that you won't be communicating with the audience. This takes a fair amount of trust because if I'm only memorizing bullet points, I might think, but what will I say in between the bullet points, right? You're gonna be okay though. If you know what it is you're generally trying to get across. And heck, we may change it depending on the audience. Sometimes when I'm talking about my business, I will talk about it how I spoke about it here today with all of you. Sometimes when I'm speaking about my business, I'm emphasizing another important aspect of my business because it's a different crowd than here today. So I hope that that's helpful, but memorization does take time and you can't do it last minute. Because if you're nervous about it, you're automatically going to be memorizing more slowly because your prefrontal cortex is not working as well. So it's just how our brains work. We need to memorize with a long lead up if that is going to be your goal. And you can memorize in chunks. And I would suggest you think of memorizing by working backwards. If I'm learning an opera, for example, I will start at the end and I will memorize backwards from there because we tend to be most familiar with the first points of what we're doing and then we kind of start feeling like we're getting more lost as we go on. So if we're thinking of things working backwards in chunks, we're going to be building towards our most familiar material. Hope that answers your question. Okay, I think that this was my last slide. Here's my information. I do want to open up the floor, but feel free to email me. I have business cards up here. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Sometimes when we're talking about topics like this, there can be a little bit of sensitivity around it. Not all of us would like to raise our hands and say, oh my gosh, I get so terrified when I get up in front of a crowd, right? That sometimes feels a little vulnerable to admit in a room full of people. So if you have something that you want addressed that I didn't touch on today, feel free to reach out. Yeah, there's all of my stuff. And who has questions, comments? Yes.
Any particular tips or changes to your general approach when it's a purely Zoom presentation?
Yes.
Sitting alone?
You know, I have a whole entire hour talk that I could give just on Zoom presenting, because this is a good point. Now, we're not maybe doing it as much as we were during the pandemic, but if I had to give you a quick and dirty rundown of my 45-minute presentation, I would say, make sure that you are well lit, even if that means buying a ring light. That might make you feel like a social media influencer because they all use them. They're like 20 bucks on Amazon. Make sure that you have a light source that is aimed at your face and not overhead light. Because when we have overhead light in our office at our desks, we're missing a lot of the facial expression. And it's really, really important that people get an idea of our personalities, our passion, our excitement, our knowledge of our product. So make sure you have front-facing light on you. I have a USB microphone that I use. And if I'm giving a Zoom presentation about Zoom presentations, I will turn it on and off for the listeners to hear the difference. It makes a real difference in clarity of speech when you're using an external USB microphone. A nice, a mid-range one will run you $100. I think it's well worth the investment. I use one called the Yeti by Blue Yeti, Snowball by Blue Yeti or something like that. Anyway, another thing you want to do, and this is hard to do. Another couple things. You want to, as much as you can, and this is so weird, you want to look directly into the camera so that you're making eye contact. So take a Post-it note and draw a smiley face, put it right above your camera to remind you, don't look at the faces. So unnatural. But if we're looking at the camera, so right now for all the folks on Zoom, I'm looking at the camera and they're automatically more engaged because I am speaking more to them. When really, you know, if you're my Zoom audience, you're the faces. Yeah, I need to be looking at the camera. Another thing is, once you've gotten your self view, once you've seen, okay, I'm in the camera and I'm in good light and everything's fine, hide your self view. Do you think I would roll in a full length mirror to this presentation today and stare at myself the whole time? Well, no, that would be terribly distracting. We would never do that in real life. Yet we see each other doing it on Zoom all the time. You're constantly, how's my hair? What am I doing now? Oh, is this what's going on here? Oh, I'm looking good today, right? We see people glancing back and forth from their own view to themselves. Very distracting. Other questions? Yes.
On Zoom, someone is asking any pointers at engaging your audience with questions or dialoguing with them.
Gosh, that's very context specific and dependent. So in a room of this size with this many people, depending on how talkative all of you are today, had I gone through and asked for more questions through my presentation, I might have personally run the risk of getting off track, getting sidetracked, or sometimes we have somebody in the room who's a little bit more dominant and they sidetrack us. I do like to announce at the beginning, if there is anything you're not understanding, please raise your hand and let me know. Otherwise, I plan to leave time at the end for questions and answers. If we're talking to a small group of people and we really want to engage them, then you can do some of the things that I did today where I said, raise your hand if this, or tell me how you feel when X, right? So that I could get you going, oh, she's actually talking to me. She's actually having a conversation with me and she's paying attention to my person here in the room. So we can do that, I think, at certain points. It's going to depend on your comfort level. I would say a lot of these are sort of next level skills to engage your audience. And I would at first focus on nervous system and anxiety management before I might focus on something like that. Yes.
So I liked that your presentation was pitching and presenting.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you have any special tips for lengthy presentations, like half day, whole day.
Gosh, that is a lengthy presentation. I would say you really need to amp up your self-care prior to that day, and your preparation really needs to be on point so that you leave plenty of time before that half day or full day of recovery. Because if we're just working up to the last minute, we're spreading ourselves really thin, we're likely not sleeping as much, we're maybe not paying as much attention to moving our bodies, getting outside, engaging socially, nourishing ourselves in all of that ways. Our resources are already very tapped. And you know, if I have a performance, if I'm singing a whole opera, or I actually have an ABBA cover band here in town called Albuquerque, come check us out. If I'm up on stage for 2.5 hours performing and I have all these tunes memorized, I am exhausted the next day. And I am professionally trained to do this, right? So if this is not something you're doing often, you need to think like a marathoner. You need to really think like an athlete, think of how you're treating your body, think of getting your rest, having plenty of presentation or preparation in advance. You want to be mindful that you are hydrating well the day before. When we know we are thirsty, when we say, gosh, I'm thirsty, we're already dehydrated. And we cannot hydrate in the moment. So, well, we can, but we need to have high levels of overall hydration before going into stressful situations, because we will be depleting and excreting a lot of our nutrients and minerals. So it's really kind of thinking like an athlete, that you have to be ready for this big day. And then also sometimes the voice is an issue for that. If you're speaking for long amounts of time, that would probably take some extra work with a professional. If you're concerned about losing your voice, there's likely something in your speech patterns that you are not aware of that is causing you vocal fatigue?
What was your fifth step?
Fifth step
I'm sorry, I
was
didn't write that.
pitch day, the day of the pitch.
That was 4, wasn't it?
I think that was 5.
Forest practice.
Forest practice, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you in the back.
What are your tips for cooling off from the adrenaline after the pitch has been done?
Oh, yeah, go run around in circles. No, it's true though, like when I exit a performance or when I leave here today, I will be in an elevated state. Not so elevated that I feel like I need to go do something, but the best thing you can do there is actually, once again, think like an athlete. I'm always slightly jealous of athletes because they do these really high adrenaline, high pressure activities, but they get to then do exactly what our bodies were meant to do in these situations, which is run or fight, right? So the starting gun goes off and they take off running, or the match starts. They get to burn off all of these hormones and chemicals coursing through our system. Whereas I joke as a singer, I don't get to run from the lion. I don't get to fight the lion. I have to stand on stage next to the lion and sing next to him for an hour, right? I don't get to burn it off in the same way using large muscle groups. So really exercise is the best way to do that. Probably for a lot of people being social, I'd say you want to burn off some of this stuff and then maybe do something like a meditation. Yes.
Same note, do you think if you do something like that, people who maybe crash afterwards or get a little depressed?
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe doing something like that could mitigate those, or is that a completely different thing where that crash after?
Yeah, and I know some of you have to leave, and I'm free to stay and continuing answering questions for whoever wants to stay. So you're saying that you give the presentation and afterwards you just go, oh my gosh, I feel so depleted.
Yeah, to the point of like you almost get depressed.
Yeah, that can happen. It's called a drop state. So likely there, it's the opposite, is that you are, it took so much out of you that you can't continue on with your day, and maybe you have another important meeting to get to. In that case, actually a way to re-energize is to do the opposite of the breath pattern that we did before. So to do a really big inhale and a fast exhale, fast short exhale. Now, doing this right now in my already slightly elevated state makes me feel worse because it's increasing the energy in my system. But if you are feeling that big drop and you need some energy, you might want to do some jumping jacks, run in place, get things going again, do that type of breathing activity. And really, I would guess that a big part of this, not knowing you, but just knowing humans in general, a big part of this is also the negative self-talk, and that we are crapping all over ourselves and we're thinking it's never good enough, and we're really depleting ourselves emotionally as well, right? That can oftentimes be an aspect. Who else? Yes.
So how would you handle this? Something that's been happening more and more in scientific presentations at conference. You're there presenting and 3/4 of your audience is sitting on.
Oh, I know, it's the worst.
Sitting down.
Yes.
Yeah. My email.
Oh, I know,
I don't know. How
I know.
do you handle that?
Yeah. This is that part of identifying the friendly faces in the crowd and making a very conscious decision to only speak to those people. Because we need that feedback. And this is why Zoom presentations are also hard, is because oftentimes people have their cameras off and we're getting no visual feedback that somebody's actually enjoying something. You know, you all have been a lovely audience today. You're nodding, you're smiling, you look engaged, you look like you want to be learning, maybe you're enjoying your lunch. But when we see people are very checked out, and I teach a course at UNM, and so I see this in my class too, right? When students are just like zoning out, or they're on their computer, but you can tell they're not actually doing what you want them to be doing. This is where we have to practice really good, what I would call mental hygiene, and recognize that when somebody is on their computer, it feels hurtful to us. It feels like, well, you don't like me? You don't like what I have to say, right? And that we get our feelings hurt a little bit because they're checked out, because they're not essentially being respectful. And it's true, they're not being incredibly respectful, but we can either choose to focus on that, or we can make the choice to bring our focus somewhere else. So perhaps this would be a part of a pre-pitch routine where I remind myself, today, I intend to speak slowly and clearly. I'm going to get to the venue early. I'm going to do this to prepare, etc. I'm going to remind myself that when I come into the room, to ignore the people who seem disengaged and to only engage with people who are engaged. Because what I like to say is, even for myself as a singer, I cannot expect that everybody in the audience is going to love my voice. That's impossible. Not everybody in there will love my voice. Some people will love me or like me. Some people will feel neutral about me, and some people won't like me, and that's their prerogative because it's art and it's subjective and they don't have to like me. So what do? I try to find the faces in the audience that do seem to be liking what I have to do and focus on those, because yeah, there's no getting around it in today's technology age. People are on their phones. I mean, I gave a presentation one day where it was 4 people sitting around me. We were kind of sitting in a circle, and one woman was on her phone the whole entire time in an itty bitty circle. So it's very rude, and it's also unavoidable in today's landscape. Yes,
Is it okay to call them out on their?
that's a risk. You could decide whether you want to take that or not. I do think that a kind of sneaky way of doing this, maybe getting people to pay a little bit more attention, is by starting to ask questions. So I'd love to hear from people in the room what or oh, you looked like you had something to say, and not to necessarily call out the people on their computers, but if you are engaging with your audience more and you are making more eye contact, suddenly they become a little bit more polite. Tendentially. It's not always going to happen, but if you are actually looking at people versus, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous and I'm just going to read from my sheet. Oh my gosh, they're on their computers. Now, I'm not saying that that's what anybody in here is doing, but we've all seen that done before. But when we have more communication back and forth, you feel more seen by me. You're likely to sit up a little straighter and pay a little bit more attention. Yes?
Would you sing 10 seconds of your favorite song?
No, I will not. It was worth a try though. Somebody always tries.
I was thinking that.
You can look me up on YouTube. Just look my first name and last name up, or you can come see Albuquerque, or go visit my website, which is just ingelaonstad.com. That's for my professional singing and the gigs I do around town. Yes.
I'm just wondering if you have seen much of a difference through the pandemic and the skills that are getting.
Yeah, I do think that there is a difference, because a lot of people, I mean, just the other day, I was at a coffee shop, a brewery, I was somewhere, and I overheard a conversation when I was at the counter getting my drink of somebody saying, yeah, I'm just checking this place out for the first time. I really haven't gotten out much since the pandemic. Now, I'm pretty social, so I get out a lot and I perform, so I'm forced to be in. But it was an interesting moment where I thought, okay, here we are, latter half of 2023, and some people are still feeling very hesitant to get out and about amongst people. So I do think the more overall anxious of us, or overall socially anxious of us, of course, any folks with health concerns who have very good reason to be very protective, likely have had a bigger impact. We've seen the increase in anxiety rates in our teen population, in our child population, in our adult populations. All mental health diagnoses of depression, suicide, anxiety are all climbing. So does this impact folks' ability to stand up and do something risky? I can't help but think absolutely. Yeah, so that might be all the more reason to practice some of your skills if you feel like you're one of those folks. Yes.
How long is your free consultation?
How long? 30 minutes.
So if we wanted to practice our pitch.
Yeah, sure.
You would be open.
Yes, I would also be speaking about my further services, and in 30 minutes, there's a fair amount that I can give you a couple, quick takeaways. But we can't usually go in depth, but if you wanted to do that, I'd be more than open to that. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? I know we're a little bit over time. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for your interest. Thank you all for being here. I hope I was the product of my own product. And if you have any questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes.